Well, welcome back, everybody, to the Reforming Nerdom podcast. I am one of your hosts, Jordan Cecile, and I am joined today by the one and only P. Nate, a.k.a. Pastor Nate, a.k.a. Nathaniel P. Wright. Nate, how are you?
I'm doing great, Jordan. Feel like it's been a little while since I've been on. There's been a couple of guests, and I've been traveling, and it's good
you know
to be
what?
back.
We missed having you last week, or I did, but it was a great conversation with Corey. And one of the things that I'm finding, and I think this is just kind of the thing about Christians when you're around brothers who you have that shared uniting aspect of your life where you're Christians and like you have a shared theology, you have a shared worldview, you can just talk forever. And when we're talking about Daredevil, or a couple weeks ago when Jesse was on from Carpe Fide and his Bluey in the Bible podcast, and it's just like I literally meet the guys in the pre chat just before we start recording, and then it's just like, can we just be best friends? Because like I actually just love talking to you guys, and so it's been really fun having that conversation. I mean, like Kim and I went for close to an hour and a half, and that was us cutting it down because it was an hour and a half, and we had to just stop. But yeah, it's been fun. But I am happy that you're back, because it's always nice to be able to hang out and chat. And for our listeners, if you might be wondering, I mentioned last week that Nate and Ben were busy finishing their prep for our conference that our church was putting on, the Men of Valor conference. And Nate, how do you feel like the conference went?
Yeah, I was really happy with it. I think there was somewhere between 250 and 300 guys there. Most of them come to our church. A few guys from surrounding areas, or people brought friends. It was good. So the theme we talked about a few episodes ago when we were kind of touting the conference, it was the sons of Issachar. So being a man for the times. And we went through 4 sort of historical Christian heroes. We talked about King Alfred the Great, John Witherspoon. We talked about Hernan Cortez, and we talked about Oliver Cromwell, and just how they were men for their times. They knew what was expected of them. They did their duty, and they did it faithfully in the time in which they lived. So trying to apply that to today, it was really good. We were at our new church building, although I have to be careful in saying that, because there's a few people saying, "Oh, I love that you guys did a new build and made it look old." And I'm like, okay, well, we didn't build the church. It's a reclamation project. So it's about 170-year-old Anglican church that we've reclaimed, and it's right in the heart of Ingersoll, and our church is, I think, putting it to good use. So we got to do the men's conference there. Just to kind of give people an idea, we ended night 1 of the conference singing the doxology in that beautiful old building, and we ended the conference on Friday late afternoon singing the doxology outside the church building, which is right downtown Ingersoll, around the Christian flag that hangs out front. And the idea there is everything we learned in here is to kind of go out and we're supposed to claim the culture with it. So it was a great conference. I was really happy with it. You did a great job emceeing.
Oh, thank you. It was a lot of fun. It was, I mean, there's something to be said about standing at the pulpit in a, what was it, probably 150-year-old church. How old is it? You
170, yeah.
170, like 100-something foot ceilings, and hearing, because so I was there and I heard the doxology, and I had the best seat in the house. Like that was spectacular. Yeah. Like that was actually kind of like an emotional thing for me. Hearing that. So that was really cool. But the thing that it just made me think of was our conversations that we've had of our desire to have now at some point in the future a nerd conference. And all that conference did was make me really want to do it that much more. And so listeners, just so you know, like that is something that we're talking about, we're thinking about, we're trying to see what that could look like. Maybe not quite to the degree of a Comic-Con, but what does it look like to have, I'm just going to throw his name out there. So if you're listening, C.R. Wiley come and have a lecture on something about reclaiming, not necessarily nerddom, but like the arts, or whether it's writing or something that could pertain to some sort of a nerd conference. Andy Wilson, and like, how cool would it be for us to have a conference with guys like that who are just so brilliant?
I would even say, like, For sure. And I would even just say, like, there's some great speakers that we've already had on too, like Joshua Hames, Keith
Yep.
Foskey,
Yep.
these are guys who are Joe Boot, obviously. Like, these are sought after conference speakers of their own right, and yet they came on and talked to nerdy stuff with us. So I don't know. I feel like, I don't want to put you on the spot here, Jordan, but I feel like what we should do is we should put a cap. So it's like, once we hit this number of people in our paid patrons, we will enter the planning phase of a conference. And honestly, like, where we are, we're just a couple hours north of the border in Detroit. It's not that hard to get here for many of our American listeners. We would love to do that. So I don't know if you want to say like 100 or whatever, but let's figure that out. What's that number that makes, once we have X number of patrons or X number of listeners on a regular basis, this many downloads, whatever it is, we know that there's enough people who would prioritize getting up here for us to be able to put a conference on. Because I think one of the things about this podcast, and a lot of the people that I've talked to who have just been loving what we're doing here, a lot of people are kind of like, this is what I've been waiting for, right? I've wanted to talk about these things, but there hasn't been a Christian space to do it. So we know we've tapped into something, but it's sort of the best kept secret. So, share this. Let's expand the reach of Reforming Nerdom so that we can do that kind of stuff. Like, how great would it be with having like everything from a bunch of guys talking about, Daredevil, the new season that's out, or talking about the newest Marvel movie they've gone to, a couple of guys walking up and down the street, but on a break doing Pokemon Go or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, it just, a booth over there talking about all the Sanderson books and Stormlight Archive conversation over there. Like, it would just be such a great place.
Yeah.
So let's do it.
Well, listeners, we're working towards that. So help us make that happen. Join our...
Help us help you.
Yes. And I just can't think of something a conference that would be more fun than that. Because I think like we kind of get conference fatigue. I think like I've seen that online. A lot of pastors and guys who run these things are saying that, but I don't think people would be bored coming to a conference where there maybe like literally be a Mario Kart tournament with seedings and rankings and comic book vendors,
GoldenEye,
and like actual fun things like that. So like those are just like kind of the ideas. I mean, like Nate and I are big dreamers and big thinkers, so it's like we can't help ourselves but think about like what does this look like in 10 years and 20 years and 50 years. Like, I mean, our vision for what we're doing is I want my daughter, who is like a great artist for her age, to be an animator for a book, for a TV show, for a comic artist, whatever it is. And so like these are the types of things that we think about. So and I think that's one of the things that's been so cool about even our Discord stuff is we've been having a ton of fun meeting new people. Like we've got some people out in Idaho who are in our Discord. We've got people like all over the US and Canada, and there's just like it's like a safe place to just nerd out. And I mean, I forget who it was, but there's a guy who, I mean, if he's listening, I forget his name, like what his name is in our chat, but and he'd kill me for saying this, but it kind of looked like he was LARPing. He's not, because it's like actual sword fighting, like legitimate, real sword fighting, and he has to wear like really protective gear, like helmet and chest stuff, because they're using actual swords.
Like straight long sword like fights. And like, I know it's so some of the stuff is just like it is cool, like it's legit. So anyways, that's been a lot of fun. But one of the things that I just wanted to shout out at the conference was our sponsor, who's sponsored many of our episodes so far, 1000 Generation Book Co. He was there, and I was blown away by just some of the, like how beautiful some of the books that he had was. And Nate, like you and I were talking about this, and I spent way more money on books than my wife was happy about, but I had to buy them because they were so beautiful. And it was like the N.D. Wilson, I think it was like his authors collection series, where it was Notes from the Tilt-A-Whirl, and then the other, I forget his other. And Death by Living.
Yeah, and so it's just like, what an example of Christians doing things excellently. And it was just such a great reminder of that, where you just see like, no, do it well. And when you do it to the glory of God, like they literally produce, Canon Press, like, well done, some of the most beautiful books I've ever seen. Like they were just spectacular.
Yeah, I agree. There was something really cool about seeing people walk around with like, yeah, it's not just, pay, $15 for your digital copy of whatever that is going to go on your Kindle, but like these beautiful hardcover books that will last. And in an old building that's been reclaimed and the beauty has been restored. I think, one of the things that we would say, obviously we call it nerddom. But a lot of this has to do with just restoring the beauty and the aesthetic of things, right? Like there's something beautiful about, one of the reasons I was drawn to comic books, it wasn't just the story and just the heroes, it was the art, and it was, the fight sequences in a lot of the movies that we watch, like the prequels of Star Wars aren't worth watching, except that the lightsaber fights are legitimately beautiful.
Yeah.
So I just say that to say, like, there is something about the reclamation of beauty, and I don't think there's enough Christians talking about, we're pretty good at what's good and true, right? Teaching our kids and kind of fighting for what is good and true, but we've sometimes lost the beautiful aspect. And I think whether it's architecture, whether it's putting like books, making the books themselves beautiful again, whether it's art, whether it's film, like we talk about a lot on Reforming Nerdom, Christians need to be at the forefront of restoring beauty.
Yeah. On the note of beauty, and before we get into our topic of the show, where we're going to talk
which
about
is beautiful.
Cobra Kai, which is beautiful. Somebody shared in our Discord server a link to a game that's just about to come out. I'm not sure if it's out yet. It was one I heard about this maybe a year or two ago, but I think it's actually about to be released right now. And it is a game called I Am Jesus Christ. And it is a video game where you play from the perspective of Jesus. And you go and apparently you fight Satan in the wilderness. I don't know if that's like a power bomb or a lightsaber battle or what that actually is, but then you can go and walk on water, you can heal people. So you actually go in from his perspective. And Devin,
and choose not to heal, like,
well,
you know what I mean? Like you can impute,
one
like,
option. Yeah, you're kind of limited in terms of what you can do. Because I mean, like, so it brings up the question, because it was our buddy Devin who posted it, and he's like, I don't know what I feel about this. And my initial reaction was just like, okay, yeah, sure, it'd be funny if you could go and powerbomb Satan. Who wouldn't want to be able to powerbomb Satan? But I think there's a debate even amongst Reformed people of like, what is an appropriate visual depiction of Christ? Is it appropriate to have that? I know people would have various levels of comfort when it comes to that, in terms of, can you have any visual depiction? Is a kid drawing a picture of Jesus a second commandment violation? Or, I mean, so I think there's debate that can be had there, but it feels icky, right, when you are taking on the first person view and actually embodying Jesus.
Well, and just for the simple fact that I don't know if it's going to be open world or what the point is, but like, if you can make choices of any kind, like, you know what I mean? It almost has to be like a guided movie, to not be immediately blasphemous, because if you can make the wrong choice as Jesus, that's blasphemous, right? If you can choose not to heal somebody, you know what I mean? Like, if you can, whatever the case is, you want to make video games about the Bible, make it about David, you know what I mean? Make it about one of David's mighty men, somebody, make it about Abishai, something like that, and don't mess with the biblical narrative, but definitely don't do it with Jesus.
Well, because even if it's going to be a game that's like any other game, that the whole point of it is, or like built into the playability of it, is sometimes you fail and have to do it again.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Do you really want to say that Jesus failed in feeding people, or he failed, like he fell into the water because he did, like right when so like that's kind of a boring game, actually. If you're gonna,
the moment you go game over, you have blasphemed.
You've lost. Yes. And so, anyways, that was just like at first blush, it sounds like, oh, cool, somebody's making a game about Jesus. But then when you actually stop and think about it, oh wait, you probably shouldn't do that. And so, like, tying that back to the whole beauty thing, it's not a very nice looking game. Graphics aren't great. Gameplay's clunky. And so again, I just wonder if you have these, Christians. I don't know. I tried to find the studio that's making it. I didn't see anything from them saying whether they're a Christian studio. I kind of have to think that they would be if they're wanting to do a game like this, or
either that or it's just complete mockery. I mean, I don't know.
And maybe it didn't look like that. Yeah, it didn't look like that from watching the trailer, but either way, it was just like, if this is Christians, guys, do better.
Do
like,
better.
This is right, and that's
it.
where like just doing it beautifully, it's just not.
And this is where, like, not that I want to derail the conversation, because we've talked about this before, but this is where we just get so pigeonholed into what is a Christian video game. So you have the guy who might have the right idea, like, oh, we want to, Christianize the video game industry. Well, hey, we share that goal with you, but you don't have to do it that way. You can just make good video games. You can just make things that tell the truth about the world that God made. You can make things that celebrate what is good and true and beautiful, and that, where evil loses and you have to triumph over it, and a man has to take responsibility and save the prince. You know what I mean? Like, there are so many ways to make it Christian without making it overtly and cringily Christian.
Yep. No, I agree. All right. Well, why don't we get into something that's not trying to be Christian at all, and it's just a good time, and that is Cobra Kai. And
yes.
This was something that I was a big fan of. I think when we met, maybe like it was like 3 years ago, I think, that you and I met.
Yeah.
And it came up when we were just talking about stuff, that you love Cobra Kai, and it surprised me because I hadn't found anybody else who was actually willing to watch Cobra Kai, and I adore this show.
It's so good.
It's not perfect. Please don't hear this as like an endorsement saying there's nothing that's not
cringy
beyond
or bad,
redemption, and like, yes, there's sin stuff in it, and it's like taking it for what it is.
Fun.
That's right.
Like, I have not been this entertained watching a TV show in a long time. So I got to start by just saying I was a huge Karate Kid fan, right? Like, I did martial arts when I was a kid, so anything karate related I was into, and I participated in tournaments and competed and stuff like that. So that world to me was very real, and I just loved the original Karate Kid. I liked all three of them. Actually, and I even like the remake with Jackie Chan. So I've always been a fan of sort of the Karate Kid franchise. And so when this came up, I was intrigued immediately. And I remember watching. My brother was actually a big How I Met Your Mother fan. I didn't watch it a ton, but my brother and I lived together for a long time, so that was his like go-to, just turn your brain off and put something in the background kind of show. And I remember there was an episode one time that he was like, "Oh, Nathaniel, you're gonna love this." And it was because Barney. It was a whole episode about how Barney's hero is Johnny Lawrence, because from his perspective, and he like talked about the perspective of like, well, he's the hero of the story, right? Daniel, the new kid, comes in and steals his girlfriend and starts bullying him and all this. And you're like, what? And I remember just thinking that episode was so great. And then it's like somebody listened to that and made a series about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's awesome.
Yeah.
So I was in.
For our listeners, I guess even my history with it, I'm 4 years younger than you, so it came out in 1984. So I remember watching the first 2, 3. I don't really remember, even leading up to the show. And I guess one of the things that makes the show so good, which we'll get into, is the fact that you really don't need to go and watch all of the other movies.
Yeah, like, you don't. It's better if you do, but
it's not like required, where other things like you kind of have to. But why don't I'm just going to give a quick recap for people. If you don't know Karate Kid, they're calling it like the Miyagi-verse, I think, or something. People are calling it now.
That's awesome.
I think I heard that, the Miyagi-verse, which is fantastic. But okay, for those who don't know, Karate Kid first came out in 1984. It was directed by John G. Avildsen, starring Ralph Macchio as Daniel LaRusso, Pat Morita as Mr. Miyagi, and William Zabka as Johnny Lawrence. The film followed Daniel, who was bullied by Johnny Lawrence and his buddies. Debatable, up for yes. Who learns karate from the wise and unconventional Mr. Miyagi, to then enter into the very significant in this world, the All Valley Karate Tournament. It's like the world revolves around the All
Super
Valley.
Bowl. Yeah, it's like
it was interestingly a budget of $8 million, and it grossed over $130 million worldwide at the time.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Cultural phenomenon. It led to 3 other movies: Karate Kid Part 2 in '86, Part 3 in '89, and then the next one, which was the next Karate Kid, starring Hilary Swank in 1994. Right, Hilary Swank, and then also a reboot with Jaden Smith and Jackie Chan. And then Cobra Kai the show is really a continuation of that story of Johnny and Daniel's story, but set 20 years in the future, where it picks up really from the perspective of Johnny. And the fascinating thing about this show is that it was actually a YouTube Red show, which most people don't even know what YouTube Red was, but it was YouTube's attempt at creating scripted content and getting into and trying to become Netflix. It didn't really work out. They couldn't get success in anything else, but this random show, Cobra Kai, actually became quite popular. And then Netflix bought the rights for it. And then once they did that, it just exploded because it was really good. It was just a show that nobody knew about because people actually didn't even know what YouTube Red was. And so then now here we are in 2025. The show has finally wrapped up. Series finale happened just within the last month or so. And now we're going to talk about it because
yes, we are.
You and I both are fully caught up. There were 6 seasons in the show. This last season was broken up into 3 parts, 5 episodes, and then another 5 episodes. So before we get into the specifics of the final season, so just listeners, what we're going to do is we're going to give a bit of a general conversation about the show Cobra Kai, what we liked, why we liked it, why it's such a popular show, and why we think it was so successful. The last part of the episode, we will give you a very clear indication that we're going to go into spoiler territory for the final season because there's stuff that Nate and we just need to talk about. And so if you haven't watched it and you do care, and I really think you should, I actually am of the mind that I would rather you stop listening to our podcast at that time, go watch the show, enjoy the show, because there's just parts in that final season that are spoilers. So I think the best ending to a show I've ever seen. I'm just going to say that right now.
That's
that's
bold.
I
don't know if I'm there, but like it was really good. But
and I would love to hear what show you think ended better because I can't think of one.
Lost.
So anyways, that's just where.
Yes, kidding.
You want the
just kidding.
This is
just
the
kidding.
anti-Lost way to end a show. This is the anti-Lost. But so we'll let you know. But anyway, so Nate, why do you think? I mean, I've got tons of reasons here, but why do you think that Cobra Kai was ultimately such a good show?
Honestly, it was super likable characters. Like Johnny is, I think, just a really, really likable. And when I say likable, I mean you either love him or you love to hate him. But I think he was just such a great protagonist for a bunch of reasons. So number one, we all know that nostalgia sells these days, right? Like there's a reason Maverick was fantastic. It's because Top Gun was fantastic, and movies have sucked for so long that reclaiming something that we loved and not bastardizing it like they have with Star Wars or whatever is a sure way to make good money these days. So the nostalgia of it was great because you actually have the characters coming back and playing themselves. So that was good. And Karate Kid it's good. Karate Kid is a good, wholesome movie. Like you can watch that as a classic with your kids. When I say kids, like over 10 kind of thing, but it's a good family movie. So and honestly, it picked up and it was true to the characters. Like the movie starts and Johnny Lawrence, it's sort of like, how much did one kick, ruin his life? And that's sort of the shtick of season 1 is, it's 2-2 going into the All Valley final, and one kick ruins his life because Daniel's this successful car salesman with the catchphrase "kick the competition," and and Johnny's just this like, deadbeat dad, alcoholic, handyman, can't keep a job, dodging his rent, an old classic car that breaks down. He's that high school like super cool jock who, high school was his peak. And so we all know that guy, we all know that story, and they told that story, but they did it with really likable characters. They did it really well. And it all revolves around karate, which is great. Like if you're into, like, which I am, if you're into that, like it's just good fight sequences. It's good. It's action packed. And the thing it did really well is it's not trying to take itself too seriously. Like nobody's trying to win, a best actor in a TV show. Nobody is trying to make it seem like the most. They weren't trying to shove DEI stuff down your throat. There was no agenda except They just wanted this to be a fun and enjoyable show. And so it didn't take itself too seriously. It just, it was what it was, and it didn't try to be more. And I think that was the main success of it.
Yeah, I think the nostalgia part, it was just so well handled. And I think it comes down to that this show was written by people who actually love the source material.
Agreed. That's a good point.
You completely see that in the characters that they bring back. In like, there are some random people that they brought into this. I was just watching a recap video of it just to like refresh my memory on the first 5 seasons, because I mean, I watched the last one recently, but like, there was the girl from Karate Kid 2 that Daniel saved from like the tsunami thing, and she was the executive for the car manufacturer in Japan.
That helped save Daniel's business.
Yeah, and then there's just, in the last season, there's a character who's working with, we'll say, a villain. I mean, you could say it like Terry Silver. Like, they bring back, and that, like, even, and that's what I love about even like the nostalgia is like they bring back everybody, almost everybody that they could. They brought back for this show at some point in one of the seasons.
And it's the actual actors.
Actual people.
Like, you actually saw them.
Yes.
Yeah, it was like, even the nostalgic episode where all Johnny's Cobra Kai buddies were there, and the one guy passes away.
Yep.
Right? It's, I mean, it's just a really, they brought back everybody. The one guy plays a pastor, which is even an interesting little bit there. I don't know. I thought they did that really well. And you're right. It's writers who like the source material, so they're not trying to change it. They're trying to honor it, which is,
and I think it's a testimony to the staying power of the franchise and like what people really think of it. Because to get these people who aren't likely acting anymore, right? It's like some of these people are. I'm assuming. I don't know. I didn't look into it. Maybe that woman's acting in Japan, or maybe she is doing stuff. But from what I can tell, a lot of these people aren't. I mean, where was John Kreese acting in the last 20 years? Like, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe he has been. I don't think he has been, but yet they came back. All of them wanted to. And it's really hard often to get people to come out of their life. They haven't been acting for 20 years and to come back and want to do a project like this. And at the time, it's not like they had an unlimited budget early on. Like, this was a pretty low budget show that then exploded in popularity. So I think it's just, and I think the nostalgia, they balanced it so well where it wasn't so much that it was a little bit too on the nose. Like, it was really, I think, good where it's like, oh, that's funny, or oh, that's a cool reference. But then they also still did allow Johnny to be Johnny today, not just always hearkening back to the past. And they brought in these new characters. I mean, the kids, most of the kid characters actually were interesting characters, funny characters. Like, they had, I mean, being older now, watching a bunch of kids in high school, it's just like, it just feels a little bit funny watching like a teen drama at times, because it kind of is that.
It is,
but it's also real. And it was, and I thought the kid actors were actually really good.
They did do a good job, and I thought I think one of the most endearing things that kind of, I guess, caught me early was, I think the relationship between Johnny and Miguel is just really great. Yep. So, Johnny, as I said, it's sort of his redemption story too, like this whole thing. So, he starts, it opens up, and he's this like borderline alcoholic, can't hold down a job, deadbeat dad who like abandoned his kid and cheated on his wife and, whatever else. And so he's just this kind of deadbeat white trash kind of guy, never made anything of his life. And you even see him get into a couple of fights. Like, he's just a deadbeat, right? He's just that guy who's clinging to his high school glory days and hasn't done anything significant since. And Miguel is this kid who's, bullied and he knows he's a loser, like one of those, like, he's a self-aware loser. He knows he's a loser. He's getting picked on all the time. He's this wimpy kid, but he's a good kid, right? He lives with a single mom and his grandma. And he loves his mom and he loves his grandma and he works hard around the house, and like, he's trying to get into a good school because he's a smart kid so he can take care of his mom and grandma. Like, it's just, what I mean? He's this heartwarming kid who's a really good kid whose life all of a sudden gets like, he meets Johnny Lawrence, and Johnny saves him when he's getting bullied by 3 guys outside of a convenience store. And so Miguel seeks him out and asks him to teach him karate and teaches him how to fight like that. Which is like funny in and of itself, because like in saving Miguel, which he did, he also just like beat up a bunch of high school kids, which is hilarious, right? But Miguel seeks him out, and it kind of reignites, this passion that Johnny had for karate. And karate is all about discipline. And so all of a sudden it causes Johnny to start getting disciplined with his life and not be mastered by alcohol and not be mastered by, his laziness and all this kind of stuff. And he starts training Miguel. And I think the relationship between Miguel and Johnny is what made the whole thing work, because that's the first dynamic that you really kind of fall in love with and you want to see it through.
I really loved that they made him the focal point. And like he was the main, like this was Johnny's arc.
Yeah, that's
the
right.
whole thing, right? And again, before we get into spoiler stuff, which we will, like this whole show is about him.
It's his redemption.
Like, his redemption. And that's what, like, one of the things I really love about it is it actually, the show, yes, it has like a few little wokey pokey moments occasionally, but nothing crazy.
It's got a couple moments.
I'm talking about, I think it was like 65 episodes over 6 seasons. And there's like a couple moments that are just like baby a little bit. So really, but then when you balance that out with them letting Johnny Lawrence be the most politically correct guy you're ever going to find, like I am legitimately astonished that they allowed this character to exist in modern Hollywood.
I agree. Yeah. And I don't think it would have happened if it didn't start as a YouTube Red project. It would not have taken the same flavor. He would not have been the same guy if Netflix had this from the beginning. But they picked up something that had a bit of a cult following, and so they had to stay true to it. And I don't know much about the deal that they made in terms of the the writers themselves staying on and having control. I don't know about that, but it didn't really change the flavor of it. It's not like it got more woke as it went on, like something like the Stormlight Archives.
But and like the thing that in that as well, where you actually see at times a celebration of like masculinity, about masculine attributes of like honor, of protecting your family, of valuing your family. Like those are all things that we just don't really see a ton of. And so to see that, and I think even when you look at what we're doing with our church, so for those who don't know, our church has a dojo, which is incredible. Like we have a legitimate dojo, the Crossroads Martial Fitness Academy, where we're training.
I tried to get Cobra Kai in there. Crossroads Cobra Kai Academy. Yeah.
I mean, you just need to get the keys. Just get the keys with those and deal with the consequences. Because I think there's something that is actually entirely appropriate to get young people, whether you're bullied or not, but maybe especially if you are bullied, trained in order to protect yourself. And I think that's one of the things that this does show in there, because you do see confidence in people once they're able to understand that, oh, I don't have to be bullied. I don't have to just succumb to this. Like I can, but again, then it's teaching what we would want to teach people is balance and even mastery over those capabilities that you now have. Where, I mean, we have a guy in our church who, a former MMA fighter, like a legitimate guy, fought in the,
he won the Canadian Ultimate Fighter.
Yeah, UFC. That's what I was drawing a blank on. But yet you see him and it's like he is controlled. Like he can throw down if he has to, but he knows now, he doesn't just go around and do that and bully people, because I mean, he's a police officer. He's a great guy, and it's like an example of when you do that appropriately and do it well. And so like I do think that's a thing that the show actually should be commended for, where it's teaching boys to be boys, and it's like, no, you kind of have a duty to protect. You have a duty to be able to protect yourself and others, and because that you see that as well in that. And so I think that's great. I mean, there's a few parts where, I mean, you get these like little LGBT moments, but then you also get Johnny making fun of them, which is just hilarious. How
well, that's why I was curious to hear what you thought because that is like, there was there's when Johnny's trying to get more females into the dojo, because there's a female bracket in the All Valley, and so he's going around and there's a tough girl that he wants, and of course she's a lesbian, and because she's this butch athletic tough girl. And so Miguel says to her, Johnny, like, well, she's lesbian, non-binary, whatever, like, so just be careful. And Johnny goes up and totally makes fun, right, in a just using all the right pronouns, but it's very clear that it's mocking that whole idea. And even so, I love the character Hawk. He's actually one of my favorite characters in the show. And so for those who haven't seen it, Hawk is Miguel's friend. There's kind of these three of them. Dimitri is his name, and Eli is Hawk, right? Eli, Dimitri, and Miguel, and they're kind of three good friends, and they're all losers, and they all get beat up. And so when Miguel, just kind of, this is how it goes. He starts getting trained by Johnny, and then literally he protects a crush. He protects a girl in the cafeteria, and that causes the bullies to descend on him, and he beats them all up. And he defending himself while defending a female. He gets into a fight with the bullies, and he beats them all up. And it being 2016 or whenever season 1 came out, all the kids whip out their cell phones, and so all of a sudden social media is flooded with nerdy Miguel beating up the school jocks. So the next day, Cobra Kai is jam-packed with all these nerds who want to learn how to fight. And one of them is this kid, Eli, and he has a scar on his lip from, I think from a cleft palate, right? I think that was the idea. When he was a kid. And so he has this lip that he's always very self-conscious of, this scar on his lip. And Johnny Lawrence just looks at him. He's like, oh my goodness, what happened to your lip? And he's just like, and somebody else says, Sensei, we don't talk about that. He's like, well, if you don't want me to talk about it, then do something else. It's all I can look at, right? And he just totally makes fun of this kid. And, and he tells him, he's basically if you don't want me to look at your lip, then flip the script. Give me something else to look at.
Yeah.
And, this later scene comes in when Hawk comes back, and that didn't chase him out of the dojo. It actually encouraged him, and he cuts his hair into this crazy mohawk and gets it dyed. And the whole idea is okay, I'm going to embrace that I'm a little bit different, and I'm going to show you something else. And Johnny just says, hey, lip? Is that lip? Way to flip the script. And he's like, we'll call you Hawk from now on.
Yeah.
And so there's just these moments like that where it's it doesn't shame the bully. What it does is actually teach kids how to, grow in self-confidence, grow in their strength, grow in their fighting abilities, and to stand up for themselves. And you just don't see that anymore.
No, and it actually aligns with something that you teach from the pulpit, and I've heard you say in different podcasts that you've been in, is tell a better story as well.
That's right.
And it's empowering that kid. It's don't buy into this story, tell a better one. And all of a sudden
you're not the victim with the cleft palate and you'll always be a loser. Tell a better story. Show you're an All Valley world champion. That's what you are. And he does become that later on. So
do you think at any point, or with all the villains and stuff, do you think they tried too hard? I'm just thinking about when John Kreese shows up, and then Terry Silver, and then do you think there's any negative for having those guys there, or do you think those only provide better storytelling? Or do you think they should have had new villains come in, or is it better that they continued those stories with those guys?
Well, I mean, I don't want to get into spoilers before we say, but they introduced new villains in the last season,
yeah,
right?
A little bit,
and so you do get some kind of new villains. But no, I think it's interesting because John Kreese was always sort of the evil guy, and but Terry Silver was crazy. When you watch number 2, he's the guy who legitimately he really psychologically messed with Daniel. He was crazy, and they did a good job of conveying that he's actually kind of the crazy one. Yeah, I mean, so yes, did it go over the top at times? For sure, 100%. But that's what it was, right? And so, the some of the things that they did in terms of can we get into some spoilers? I won't get into last season yet, but I can. Okay,
yeah.
So Kreese escaping from prison is just a little ridiculous. Obviously. Terry Silver and sort of the international, take over the world through Cobra Kai stuff. It was just a little ridiculous. The fight when Chosen infiltrates Terry Silver, and Johnny fights a couple of the international guys, and Chosen fights Silver, and they're literally trying to kill each other with katana blades. You're this is over the top and ridiculous. When there's a teenager fight nearly to the death at the LaRusso's Beverly Hills mansion, it's ridiculous. So yes, it's ridiculous, but like I said, it never tried to be something it wasn't. Like we knew it was kind of ridiculous and over the top going into it, and it just embraced it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I love that they just leaned into it and they're like, "Yep, this is so silly that this entire world revolves around this." Not even statewide, not even citywide. This like region in a
Yeah,
city, this high
yeah,
valley karate tournament, and it just like the world revolves around it. And and they did. And I mean, they bring it back full circle to the All Valley,
yep.
and at the end in the final season, and it's so silly, but it doesn't get so ridiculous to be something, because I've likened it a little bit to the Fast and Furious movies, where it's, wow, this started as like a street racing kind of grunge movie into they're flying cars into space, and it's just like that gets so silly that it's almost like hard to watch actually. Where this one, you can tell they're having fun, and
Yeah.
that's what I really enjoyed about it is they're just people who love it having fun, and that's the way that these like remakes or continuation things like they need to be is they need to have people who really do genuinely love the source material, and you can see particularly in the final season how they really like it was fan service entirely. Like it
Yeah.
was, we want to make sure that you are happy because this is how we as fans of the series want this show, these arcs to be resolved. And so I just think that that's how you do it. Like this show, other writers look to it. Like I'm totally fine with nostalgia. I'm a huge sucker for nostalgia. And
Yeah, me too.
this is how you do it because like I love how they do these little very quick sometimes flashbacks to the original movies just to let you know that, oh, this character, oh, this is that person. You're like, oh, wow, this guy, cool. And they have
got
these little,
him back.
yeah.
The
And
mattress, the mattress king.
yeah, like
So funny.
it's ridiculous, right? And
Yeah.
but yet
Some of it when they show up and it's just like, when they go, what's that guy's name again? I can't remember his name. But they go to his place. He was he was like a part of Cobra Kai in season 2 or 3, or I think he was the villain in 3. And like it's just so funny that like they go thinking he's part of Silver's master plan. He's just like, dude, like I just sell mattresses now. What is
yeah,
your problem? Like like my life hasn't revolved around high school karate. Like I haven't thought about you in 20 years. It's so funny.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, are we at the time now where we want to get into the final season?
Let's do it.
All right, listeners, you have been warned. We are going to get into some specific spoilers on the final season. If you have not watched it and you do not want it spoiled, turn away. We love you. Bye-bye. If you do want to continue, stick around. And all right. So Nate, I said, I think this is the best ending to a show I've ever watched. And I really genuinely do believe that because like so many shows, you have this like it just gets better and better, or it's sustained, and then it starts dipping down, and it's like, okay, they end it. It's like, okay, we realize the time is coming. This one had that a little bit. I mean, I think because of how ridiculous it got, but it's like the final season, it was just pedal to the metal, and they
Yeah.
just didn't hold up. And I actually really think there's a formula that they followed here in the last season, which was great. The having it broken into different chunks with that kind of cliffhanger-ish ending partway through and then another one, that kind of keeps you going. And because I mean, like, who doesn't like a cliffhanger, right? Who doesn't like that, oh, wait, what? And then, okay, see you in a couple months and you're going to watch the next part of it. And so I really liked how they did that. But then it was just purely the ending that they knew fans wanted. And I don't think I was surprised at all with how it ended. Like, just like saying that, like,
Yeah, I agree. I actually, so it was a little predictable. So I was rewatching it. So just an FYI, like my wife watched this with me.
oh,
She
cool.
did not mind Cobra Kai at all. In terms of like shows you can watch with your wife. Like she liked the original Karate Kid. Her favorite one is the one with Jackie Chan and Will Smith's kid. But she likes these movies as well. She watched Cobra Kai. She liked it a lot more. The more outrageous it got, the less appealing it was to her, because I do think there's something very masculine about just the scale of like, the Seikai Taikai, this kind of
Oh,
stuff.
yeah.
But she enjoyed it, but she was starting to definitely like run out of steam in the last 2 seasons. But as we were watching it, I said to her, like, I'm looking at, they're doing the scoring at the Saikai Taikai, and I'm like, Miguel's going to have to fight for Cobra Kai, and it'll be Tori and Miguel. That's how they're going to do it. She's like, well, why would he do that? I'm like, just watch. And then when I'm watching, I'm just like, oh, I'm looking at the score, and I'm like, he's going to knock him down, and he's going to knock him down, and that's going to put them tied. And then they're going to have the senseis fight, and this is going to end with Johnny Lawrence. So like, there was a predictability to it, but I mean, they're not trying to be something they're not. They're not trying to like pull one over. They're not the Sixth Sense with the like M. Night Shyamalan ending, right? This is just give me what I want. I want Johnny Lawrence in there fighting. Like that's what I want.
And again, how utterly ridiculous is it that this high school international karate tournament gets decided by the senseis fighting?
And the one guy's like, I don't know, 30, and he's like one of the most dangerous men in the world. And then you have Johnny Lawrence, who's like the beer guzzling 45-year-old who just had a kid. Like, I just think it's hilarious.
I thought, again, even as like predictable as it was, there were parts there where, as it happened, it was like, oh yes, like there's no other way you could have done this. Where all of the guys coming out wearing Cobra Kai in the final episode. And it's like,
and they all come out doing the like Cobra Kai. Cobra
Daniel Kai. Wearing black, and even his like wife commenting on, "Ooh, he looks good in black." And I mean, he did. Black's dope.
Well, that's such a, and it's funny because every time it's like, and that is a badass name for a dojo. It's like, of course, we all like Cobra Kai more than Miyagi-Do.
Of course we do.
That was the tension through the whole thing, was just this like, oh, the balance and all this kind of stuff. And I loved it at the end where it's like, okay, I taught you balance, but like, Johnny, you fight offensively. Like, go fight, right? Like, forget, like, stop digging in, go win. So I just thought it was, and the other thing that they kind of avoided, so one of the things, Colleen and I, she really liked Robbie. She liked Robbie's character. She liked him as a character. I always liked Miguel. And so I was always like chirping Colleen because I'm like, Miguel's such a better fighter. He's beaten Robbie every time. And there's this sort of like, again, they could have done it in the egalitarian way where it's like, oh, this is Robbie's turn to win. Miguel won this one, and so won this one, and try to make it egalitarian. It's just like, no, they're just gonna find a way to like let you still like all the characters. And Miguel's not the hero anyway. Johnny is. Johnny's gonna step in and win this. So I just thought they made some good choices that way as well.
Yeah, and they really, I think, just tied such a nice bow on all of the characters, like their arcs throughout the whole thing.
So let me ask you this, because this is good. This is a really good. Let's talk a little bit about John Kreese's redemption, because it's interesting. Like, so the thing about Kreese throughout this whole series is like, okay, he's this bad guy, and then you realize actually, he's seen a lot, right? Like when it shows the backstory with him in Vietnam, and honestly, the very masculine sort of, I'm gonna take responsibility for my guys. I'm gonna step up and put my life on the line to save these guys. And yeah, he did some bad things, but it was very much motivated by protection and even sort of his protective instinct, almost fatherly instinct with Johnny Lawrence. And then he did some terrible things throughout the whole thing. So was it cheesy, or was it awesome that they redeemed Kreese at the end and he had that moment with Johnny? What do you think?
I loved it.
Yeah, me too.
I just watched it last night again as I was just kind of like putting together the show notes, just trying to like organize my thoughts. And I like teared up a little bit because so listeners, like if you haven't watched it and you're still here, or even if you have watched it, like that moment where it's John, I think it's in the second last episode. So it's Johnny hasn't fought yet. It's been announced that he's going to fight. And then Kreese is leaving. Johnny goes out and confronts him. And one of the most like amazing acting performances. Like, who would have thought this guy Johnny Lawrence hadn't acted in years since doing Karate Kid?
Who knew he had it in him?
And
Kreese, they both did well.
He just pretty much laid his like soul bare to this man and say, "You ruined my life." And you can see that it's like he was his father figure, because in earlier seasons you find out that Johnny was the stepson of some rich guy his mom married, and he didn't really have a father figure.
Very mistreated.
So John was this figure to him, and he just completely abused him. And then you see, what is the actor's name? I totally forget now. What
John Kreese's name?
Yeah, the actor.
What is that?
John Kreese actor. Let me see if I can pull that up. Martin Cove. Martin Cove.
Yeah, that's right. Cove. Yeah.
And it was just like you see him tear up and start kind of like quivering lip, and then he just goes and hugs him, and it's just beautiful. Like I loved it. But again, leaning into how ridiculous the show is, how Terry Silver is on his yacht at the end of the episode, and there's just weird, like, what is it, like gas canisters on the boat, and John Kreese, because again, like he is still the villain, so they're not just like letting him get away scot-free, but then how he sacrifices himself to take out Terry Silver because
Silver was gonna like assassinate Johnny
and his like wife and his newborn baby, and it's like Terry's clearly gone insane, and then John's like, no, you're not going to do that, and he kills himself and Terry. I mean, how silly is it? A yacht explosion. It's just like such a ridiculous thing. But again, I thought it was great because it's like they didn't do one of those things where it's just like, oh, forget about all of the terrible stuff that this guy's done. Like there's still that like sense of justice in the character.
Yeah, he needed, with everything they had him do, and that was actually, I agree with you. If he had have been there at the end and he had been one of the ones who hoisted Johnny up onto his shoulders, and it's just like, you know, father son reunited kind of thing, I think that would have been too much. Like he did too much in that series to come back from, and I think they knew that they pushed his character too far, and so he had his redemption moment, but he still had to die. And the only way to redeem yourself truly in that moment is to give your life up for someone else, which is what they did. So there's that I thought they did a great job with that. Again, over the top and ridiculous, but that is Cobra Kai. Cobra Kai is over the top and ridiculous. There was an all high school battle royale karate match that ended with a student falling off the the upper deck and landing on the railing and fracturing his back. So like this is the world we're in. So a yacht explosion made total sense.
Oh yeah. No, it was just, I thought it was how it just resolved all of it. Again, the writers were just good writers. Whoever these people are, just like kudos to you, because they managed to balance those things really well without falling into just pure insanity. But
I liked how they didn't make Johnny become Daniel. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't the, you know, Miyagi-Do and balance in your life and all that kind of stuff. It wasn't that. It was like, it was this idea that like, and this is maybe where you're getting into some of the wokey stuff, but like, I didn't think it didn't come across that way at all to me, where it's like, no, like Miyagi had something to teach. Kreese had something to teach. If you teach Miyagi-Do to Miguel, he never gets out from under the bullies. You know what I mean? Like there is something about that strike first, strike hard. And I even liked how at the very end, Johnny is back in the dojo with a new flock, if you will, of, you know, young nerds. And he goes through strike first, strike hard, no mercy. But the way he describes it at that time is like there's been growth, there's been maturity, right? He's not the bully anymore. But it doesn't mean that you have to give up all forms of masculinity or aggression or any of that kind of stuff. So I just thought it was a great ending that way.
Yeah, they didn't. I like just they matured him. So it's like, yeah, you need to not be a deadbeat, but he's still just like him. And that was, I just thought was great. They didn't compromise who he was at the beginning. He grew up and he found a woman that he loved, and he wanted to do the right thing by her and marry her. And like, so even when I was thinking about like woke stuff, like I really don't think it was significant. There was like, I think maybe those like subtle things of, again, girls in combat, like, do we really want to be promoting that?
Yep,
no.
I agree.
So it's like, that's, again, just in the fight for the culture, watching a couple high school girls in a fake fight is not pretty high on my priority list of things that I care to fight right now. Like I'd rather not see real women in combat roles in real life versus fight about this particular, but in an ideal world, I wouldn't want to see that. There's like a couple things, not that this is woke in that it's just the reality of Hollywood. I don't want to watch high school kids make out. And so it's like, there's scenes like that where it's like, I'm not going to watch that. And so it's
I
like
agree. Though that said, I mean, I thought, again, they did a good job with that. Like they don't, like, there wasn't like there was a couple things hinted at with some side characters, but like the main characters, it's not like they were sleeping around.
No, and it was
that
minimal.
kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah, like
it was
they
minimal.
did a fairly like, I mean, I can't think of any, like if you think about like the what are some of the high school things that were super popular, like the One Tree Hills and the OC and that kind of stuff. I mean, those like those kids all grew up with syphilis and you know what I mean. So it wasn't that. There was a lot more innocence to the sexuality side of things that I thought was they could have done that because that's what's popular these days, and they just didn't.
Yeah.
So I thought that was all right too.
Yeah. No, the fact that again this show exists is to me an encouragement in that you can just have a good story, good characters. You don't have to have an overt political message. And I think you see other companies like they're starting to see this. I mean, there are good shows coming out right now. I'm curious just to see how Daredevil ends up being. I know that was what I spoke to Corey about last week. I don't know if you're planning on watching that, but I do plan on watching it
for sure.
because I think actually it's going to turn out to be a pretty good show. But do you plan on watching the new Karate Kid movie? Like, is this a movie? Like, would you go see the new one, Legends? Would you like take Judah to go see that? Like, is that a movie that you would even let him, or is he too young?
I think I would. So, I mean, one thing we didn't talk about is I do think, even though Cobra Kai was generally speaking clean, I do think that as it increased in popularity, they were fighting off the temptation to let it slide. Like they dropped a few F-bombs in the last season that they weren't doing in the early seasons, and things like that. Now, one or two F-bombs in a show, that doesn't actually really bother me as much as maybe it should, or maybe it does others. I think I'm much more bothered obviously by sexual stuff or by the Lord's name in vain and stuff like that. So it was still a very clean show, but I definitely want to kind of see it first before I brought Judah, just because Judah is quite young. Yeah. But that said, like anybody who's listening to this and you haven't even watched Cobra Kai, but you also haven't watched the Karate Kids, like watch the original Karate Kid. Watch the one with Jackie Chan. The one with Jackie Chan is that one I have already watched with Judah. He's seen that movie. It's incredibly clean. It's good. I think Jackie Chan's a great guy to watch in terms of like watching that with your sons, because he's such a great martial artist, and entertainment, the way that he fights and stuff like that is just so cool. So yeah, I will definitely watch it. I think I struggle watching Daniel. I think even in the early ones, he was always the worst fighter of all the teenage actors. He was always the worst fighter. He still is. I still cringe in all of his fight scenes. But Johnny's actually he's decent, and I thought they did well with that. So yeah, I will watch the new one for sure.
Daniel moves like a guy who does not actively fight, and he's in his 60s now. Yeah, like he didn't look.
Everything is very like robotic, right? It's just very like, and now I place my hand here, and you know.
Was there anything in the final season that you didn't think landed? Because I do have a few things that I didn't love that I mean.
Yeah. So there were a couple things. So I thought that for example, I thought that the Miyagi in the Seikai Taikai, that he killed somebody. Even the necklace stuff. I know they tied that together. That him killing a guy in the Seikai Taikai, you never really got resolved. So there were a few things that I just think they didn't tie off well. I don't think that I forget the girl's name, from back in Vietnam, whose grandfather, was the one who taught Kreese his style and all that kind of stuff. I can't remember the names. Yeah. I thought that all that stuff back in Vietnam was very, I don't think that landed well. Yep. I actually thought they did a good job. So Quan, like when Quan died, that's not how I thought it was going to happen. I actually thought that Quan was going to kill the guy from the Flying Dragons.
I thought so
that's
as
how
well.
I thought when he had the blade and he was going in. I thought that's what was going to happen. Yep. So I actually was a little disappointed because the Flying Dragon duo, they did a better job with the girl, just because you hated how annoying she was with her kind of social media feed. But like that guy, abused by the sensei. Like, I just don't think they did a good enough job to make me care about him at all. So he was this sort of like faceless new enemy that they inserted that I didn't like as much. I think Quan would have made a better final boss kind of thing.
Yeah.
But and then Johnny maybe fighting and beating Silver, like they could have done something totally different that way, but they had to redeem Kreese somehow. They couldn't have done that without him killing Silver and sacrificing himself. So
yeah,
those are just a few thoughts, but
that's actually one of mine. Is the whole, I forget the name of the dojo that they came from, Quan and like the Korean thing.
Flying Dragons, I think.
I thought that whole thing with the old guy who was there, and then his daughter or granddaughter ends up, killing him to take over, and it was just like, really, you're murdering your grandfather to take over a high school dojo? It's just like, but to them it was
and then not going back to the Seikai Taikai yourself anyway.
Yeah.
And then Chosen's gonna marry you, I guess.
Yeah, it was just like it didn't really land for me. It just seemed like okay. So I didn't love that, and I thought the whole making Axel hate Miguel because he, in like one beach conversation with Sam, fell in love with her or something, and then
that was a bit
just like,
much.
That's a little much to push that
a little
in.
high schooly.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, I get you need to have this conflict between them, and it like you had to make it so that Miguel was the guy, and there had to be like that tension between them. It was just, I think you're right. Quan would have went way better, and again, because I think it would have been Miguel and Robbie are now brothers. Both, like,
that's right.
Now legally brothers, and like they're actually brothers because their parents were married, and it would have just, I think, been better for him to actually fight, like have Quan be the guy who broke Robbie's leg, leg, and then had it been Miguel come in to defend his brother against this guy who I think Quan was actually a great kind of he was a good villain because.
He was a good villain, and he was a fantastic martial artist. And I don't know how much other people care about this stuff, but like for me, I also really enjoyed. This is one of the reasons I liked Miguel. Miguel's the actor who played Miguel was, I think, the best martial artist of the bunch. I think Hawk was actually very good as well.
Yes.
All of them did well though. Like none of them were as bad as Danny.
Yeah,
incidentally.
Yeah.
But as the actual Karate Kid. But Quan was fantastic. That kid, I don't know who that actor was, but he was a fantastic martial artist. So I agree with that. The other thing that I just was a little bit, because you learn to like all these other characters, I didn't like that they made the Seikai Taikai all about the captains. I wanted to see Hawk fight. Like, you know what I mean? And I get that they didn't have enough time to like build up, but I wanted to see Kenny fight again. Kenny was good. Like his character kind of fell off. And so I was disappointed you don't get to see Kenny fight again. You don't get to see Hawk fight again. I wanted to see Penis Breath fight again. You know what I mean? Like, and like Dimitri, like the nicknames just kill me. Like I thought it was so funny.
Yeah.
But like I just thought that those characters, they do actually make you love them. And so it would have been better if instead of taking the time to introduce these brand new characters and why the guy has fell in love with Sam and therefore hates Miguel. Like it shouldn't have just been the captains, is I guess my point.
Yeah, no, I agree. The necklace stuff really didn't land, but I don't know if I had mentioned this to you before when we were chatting. I think from what I heard, that had something to do with an arc that they were trying to bring into the show involving Hilary Swank to bring her back in. And so they did it hoping that they could get her, but then they couldn't end up actually getting her.
So they just tried to tie it up as best they could.
And so it was like, okay, like kudos, they tried, and it just didn't land. So I mean, that's not great. And then the other thing, I really didn't like the use of AI for Miyagi, like the deep fake. It just didn't look right. I wish they did that in a different way.
He was such a kind of brittle old guy in 1984. Like the fact that they made him look so strong and young and fluid, it just didn't fit. You're right. He was always that. Yeah, I agree. I thought they could have gotten away with using AI like they did with like Tarkin in Star Wars. They just had to make it, number one, he couldn't fight. You can't make him fight. It just looks too fake. And they should have done it far more sparingly.
Yeah. A couple things just that I love just like the bow they tied on the season. So one of them being when Johnny beats Wolf, the much younger crazy guy, youngest ever to win the. And I just love how like the
It's so good.
and just it's just brilliant. And is that not the coach from Mighty Ducks? That actor.
Yes.
Well, what was
Yes.
his name again? I couldn't. Didn't he have like a significant?
Yeah.
What was his name
I
in
can't
Mighty
think of
Ducks?
his name in
Anyways,
Mighty
but I just
Ducks.
that's all. I don't know if he's
Yeah.
acted since then. Maybe he has. But all I saw was the coach from for Team Iceland in the Mighty Ducks.
He was Wolf. Yeah, Wolf. Who ended Coach Bombay's career by
Yes.
in the NHL, slashing him in the knee or whatever. So it's just like
Wolf Stanson. Wolf Stanson.
Wolf Stenson.
Yeah.
So good, right? Like,
Yeah, I loved it.
yeah.
But first off, how Johnny wins not by striking first.
Yeah.
How he listens to Daniel.
Yeah.
Wolf comes in, he drops down, takes him down, and he wins by not. So I think it's just, I thought it was a great kind of bringing together of Miyagi-Do and Cobra Kai, where it's like Daniel has this pep talk where he's like, essentially, stop being I'm not going to use the word, but a baby, like man up, get in there, be aggressive. And pretty much, but then you see Johnny realize that to win, he actually, he's not strong enough. He's not fast enough. Like Wolf is a far superior fighter. So he had to take Daniel's lesson. I thought that was awesome.
And I actually thought it was a good concession. I don't know if Daniel's the one who says it, but it's definitely implied in the dialogue and things that Johnny had said earlier is like, Johnny was a better fighter. 10 times, 9 times out of 10, Johnny wins that All Valley final against Danny. But like he says, well, why did I beat you then? Right? You should have won that fight. Why did you win it? Because you were overconfident and I was willing to sit back and wait. And so, yeah, I thought that was good.
Well, because like, let's be honest, the crane kick is one of the dumbest ways to lose a fight.
So bad.
What a terribly dumb way to lose a fight. But it's just like the point being, you just had you need to wait, and you rushed and you.
How much did you like in season 1 when they went to the All Valley and Miguel uses the crane kick on one of somebody kind of like stares down Danny? Do you remember that? That was so good.
Oh yeah. It's just like that hearkening back to those little moments, and like one of the other things, and this was just again like a beautiful way to just show the relationship and the dynamic between Daniel and Johnny, where at the end of Karate Kid, Johnny says to Daniel, "You're all right, LaRusso," and then at the end of this, "You're all right, Lawrence," and it's like, like poetic, right? It's just beautiful. And then for the show to end, like I think it's the final, very last scene of the show where they're sitting down to have dinner. Johnny's like not there. Daniel's sitting there at the table, and then there's a fly, and he grabs his chopsticks, and he's about to do it. And then Johnny just comes in and just smacks it with his hands. He's like, I got it. And it's just,
I got it. Don't worry.
Right? And it's just such right? And it's just wrap it up. Done. That's it. And so, I just think it was fan service. It wasn't like trying to do anything like, subverting expectations. It wasn't pulling a Sopranos where it's like, we're just done and wait, like that's it. It's just, they gave the fans what they wanted. Everybody wanted to see Johnny end well. Everybody did. Like, it's just, and if they didn't do that, but you know what? It was still, it's a hard, I think, balance in I think by the time you get to the scene where like they're fighting, you really just kind of knew that Johnny was going to win, but then they still managed to have enough tension in that fight where it's like, I think so. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty confident like they're not going to do Johnny like that, right? They can't do that to Johnny Lawrence. But then I also could have seen them do something where it's like the message being like your identity doesn't have to be in winning the tournament, because now you have a wife, now you have your son, and so they could have done it. Like they really could have made it, but
I was actually worried that they would. To be, if I'm totally honest, I thought that they might, and I was like, I would get it, but I would be very disappointed. So
no, you can't make the fight of the final of the Saikai Taikai go towards the senseis and somehow have Johnny Lawrence be able to fight to then not have it end with Johnny Lawrence winning after all that. Like there's just, that would have been doing him dirty, and that wouldn't have been fair. And so I'm thrilled they did. They gave him what he deserved, and I mean what we all wanted. So
One of the things I thought that was really cool in the last season is like the self-awareness of how crazy the story had gotten, where like there's a few times when Johnny says, yeah, last time I did this, I was fighting off 4 ninjas with a katana. And they're like, what? Like, you know what I mean? Like they're just little things that they would say, but just a self-recognition of how crazy things were, where like even where Danny's wife would say something like, she's just like, yeah, it'd be nice if my life didn't revolve around high school karate, right? Like just little things, like it was so good.
I was just going to say that she was kind of that balancing voice in it, but then in the final thing, she's wearing the
she's got the like face painting,
and it's just like such an awesome thing, because the entire time she's like, can we just be done with karate? And then finally, but then it was her at the end who told Daniel, because I think he had said to her, okay, I'm done. Like, this is good. I'm happy. And then she's like, no, you're not. And then they keep doing, and it goes like, it ends with, Cobra Kai and Miyagi-Do still being kind of partner dojos, teaching the students the strengths of each of them. And it's just great. And so, I don't know. I don't know if you have more to say, Nate. I just think it was great. I am so happy. It was fun. I really did love this show. There were times like when they dropped the season where on a Saturday night or Friday night, I did not make any plans, and I just stayed up till like 3 o'clock in the morning and watched like 5 episodes in a row, because it was just it was so easy to watch. And
it was
it was great. So I don't know. Do you have anything else that you wanna add?
No, I think that's it. I think that's good. I think what I really liked, and I'll just maybe end with this, is that I think it wasn't just the redemption of Johnny as like he went from a guy who, was trying to cheat and, whatever, was kind of the bully, to like a good guy. It was also just the maturity of Johnny in that like he'd reconciled with his son. He had essentially adopted Miguel, and Miguel was like, his son, and he actually has his own son. And there's even in that, I think, third last episode or whatever, where not only does he goes to his pastor buddy and asks him about like, marriage and, wanting to do things right. And I mean, it doesn't get super deep or theological at all, but there is this acknowledgement of like, this is the right thing to do, is to make an honest woman out of her. And he proposes to her right before she goes into labor. And like, it's just a really, so I even love the scene where, this is where Colleen was watching, and she's like, "Aw!" Right when he buys the house, right near one of the last scenes, and he's covering her eyes and shows her the house and stuff like that, and like it's just he's become a man.
Yep.
Right. So there's this high school jockey guy who thinks he knows what masculinity is, thinks it's lording his strength over others and pushing other people down, but what he learns is bearing responsibility, doing taking care of and protecting those around you. Finding a wife that you love, having a house, having a purpose in life. Like it really is like he really did learn what it means to be a man. And I really liked that.
Yep. All right. Well, listeners, viewers, please go watch the show.
Yeah.
Just enjoy it. If you stuck around this long, maybe you've already watched it. If you haven't, I still think it's worth it, even if we might have just spoiled the ending, because like how it gets to it. I mean, there's so much there that we didn't talk about, and the show
Stingray.
Oh my Stingray. Like, come on. Like, there's just so much stuff, and it's so good. You really just enjoy it. Again, if you don't, cool, whatever. But it really is. I think we need to celebrate good shows right now where they are, or like if there's, it's so hard for us to find good shows. So when there is one that is worth watching, like, let's support it, because then right when they get those numbers up, that's why they keep making more of that stuff. Right. At the end of the day, these companies, they're about their bottom line. They need to see viewers. If they see there's viewers for this stuff, they're going to keep making good stuff and not just force like woke stuff on us. So it's, go check it out. But all right, I think that brings us to the end of our Cobra Kai discussion. So listeners, thank you for joining us. And just a reminder that you can watch all of our stuff, Reforming Nerdom, on YouTube. Check us out on podcast services. You can also join our Discord server for a measly $2 a month, and that gets you access to our Discord server. And just to give you a little bit of an update there, we got some fun things planned that we're going to be doing a monthly book club. We're going to be doing, we're coordinating right now and planning some regular trivia nights to try to bring together our audience that are spread out across North America. And we're also planning not sure yet what game we're going to do, but an actual like video game, a round robin season type thing where we're going to be trying to coordinate that. And again, we just want to be able to build a community of fellow nerds. So if you're wanting to connect and meet some other nerds, Christian nerds, we'd love to have you over there for only $2 a month. You get in there and join us. We'd love to have you. But until you do that, stay nerdy.